Imagine, if you will, a beautiful rich young woman. She drives a new car, wears the latest designer clothes, and she's the apple of her father's eye. Now, imagine that she's found dead in an abandoned basement, her body charred beyond recognition. No witnesses and no apparent motive. This was the fate of Kim Antonakos. I'm going to walk you through the mystery of her death, and you won't believe what really happened on that horrible night. Good to see you. I'm Chris, and this is True Crime Recaps. We're here every week bringing you all the crime in half the time. And if that sounds good to you, please give this a like and subscribe. It only takes a second, but it means the world to us. Now, the story I want to tell you today is one of the most brutal and savage homicides in the history of Queens, New York. And, that's saying something. Kim was a 20-year-old business major at the college at Staten Island. She was the only daughter of a wealthy computer executive, and he loved to spend his money on her. She had a brand new Honda Accord and a comfortable apartment in Queens. He made sure she wanted for nothing. But despite her lifestyle, she wasn't a spoiled princess. She was a sweet girl who always tried to make sure people around her were comfortable. When she went missing in March of 1995, she had some temporary roommates. Her good friend's boyfriend, and their 3-year-old son were all kicked out of their family's place, and they needed a place to crash while they looked for a more permanent living solution. And Kim offered them her place while they figured things out. But her good heart made her a target. As it turned out, her friend's 22-year-old boyfriend, Josh Torres, was a small-time crook with a big plan. He saw her new car and her nice apartment and decided that she was a daddy's girl who could bring him a lot of money. And he came up with the idea to take her captive and force her dad to pay him $75,000 in ransom to set her free. On March 1st, Kim went out clubbing with some friends. It was after 2 a.m. when she pulled her car into her parking garage. But she wasn't alone. Josh's friends, Jose Negron and Nicholas Libretti, were lying in wait. When she got out of the car and headed for the elevator, they grabbed her. Now, Kim was a fighter, and she didn't make it easy, but it was 2 against 1, and she didn't stand a chance. They wrapped duct tape around her mouth, eyes, hands, and feet, and threw her in the trunk of her own car. And from there, they took her to the basement of an empty house in Queens where Josh was waiting. With her still wrapped in duct tape so she couldn't see or scream, the 3 of them took her wallet, keys, and jewelry. Then they tied her to a chair and tied the chair to a pole. She had no hope of escape. And tragically for Kim, she'd been kidnapped by 3 deadly morons. Now that they had her as bait, they went fishing for cash. But when they called Kim's father to make the ransom demand, they got the answering machine. But they weren't smart enough to wait for the beep before they started talking. So her dad never got the message. When he hadn't heard from his daughter in a couple of days, he got worried and reported her missing, thus kicking off a massive search for Kim. Unbeknownst to him, the guys who took her were right there in the search party. Josh was telling everyone how worried he was and how much he loved her like a sister. But in actuality, he and his friends had no idea why their master plan wasn't working. Why was her father ignoring their very clear instructions about where to drop the money? Why did he get the police involved when they told him not to? It never occurred to them that he didn't get their message. And by now, Kim had been tied up in the basement for 3 days without water or food or heat in the freezing cold. And her kidnappers were panicking. They were all sitting around debating about what they should do, and eventually they decided to let her go. So Josh and Nicholas went to the abandoned house to untie her, but she never got that happy ending. When they got there, Kim was unconscious and almost dead. They didn't check her pulse, but Josh said he kicked her leg and she didn't move. So he decided she was gone, and he was wrong. In the end, what they did next is what killed her. Josh insisted that they burn the house to get rid of the evidence, so they went to the gas station, bought a can of gas, went back to the house, and set it on fire. But as bad as that is, this is the part that proves how evil they truly were. Just before he dumped gasoline all over her, Josh leaned down, kissed her on the forehead, and whispered in her ear, "Shit happens, and life sucks." Then he lit a match and burned her alive. But if they thought that gruesome event would be the end of it all, they were wrong, because you know what they say, there's no honor amongst thieves. And 3 months later, Josh realized that 3 can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. And he'd become obsessed with the idea that Jose was going to rat them out to the police. And he wasn't totally wrong. For insurance, Jose had recorded them discussing the crime. If only he had gone to the police with it sooner. Because on June 23rd, 1995, as he and his wife were walking down the street with his son in his arms, Josh walked up behind him and shot him in the head. And that's what the police believed happened, but he was never convicted for Jose's murder. Meanwhile, Kim's father was determined to find out what happened to his daughter. He offered $10,000 in reward money for any information about her. And in a way, this was the ransom money he would have paid to save her if he'd only gotten the message. At least, that's how Josh and his last living accomplice figured it. So he and Nicholas put their heads together to try to come up with a way to claim the reward money. And they weren't too quiet about it either. After an unrelated robbery in October 1995 put the 2 of them on the police radar, 2 witnesses came forward to tell police they'd overheard them talking about what they did to Kim. But that wasn't enough for the police to make a move. It wasn't until a longtime friend of the kidnappers came forward and spilled what he knew that they had enough evidence to actually arrest the evil idiots who took Kim's life. The star witness was a guy by the name of Julio. He had actually dated Kim, and it was that relationship that finally made him turn on Josh and the others. In November of 1996, Josh and Nicholas were found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 58 years to life. Julio got up to 6 years because he knew about it, but didn't do anything to stop them. Now, why second degree and not first? Because in New York, first-degree murder is only for people who kill a cop. As for Kim's poor father, he told the Daily News that he partly blamed himself, saying, "I should have made her come back to live in Staten Island. I think about it all the time. It was her goodness that was her weakness." Although between you and me, if Josh and his accomplices had more than a couple of brain cells between them and knew how an answering machine works, then her father would have paid the ransom demand, and just maybe Kim would still be alive today. And that's your recap. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. If you like getting all the crime in half the time, don't go anywhere before you click the next recap coming up right after this. See you there.